So if you've been out in public at all in the last several years, I think...
So hopefully everyone that's listening right now.
Right. So hopefully you're not
if not,
holed up in a cabin in the woods writing a manifesto or something.
Yes. Get some help.
Yeah. But I mean, Josh, I don't know about you, but everywhere I go, there's just a level of rudeness and crassness that would make my grandmother get the vapors.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, and I've noticed recently, and I understand it's intentional, that a lot of politicians have now started swearing in general. Yeah. I mean,
I haven't noticed this trend.
It is a politically driven decision intended to show disgust and passion. That the Democrats have done it, and they're regularly dropping F-bombs and S-bombs, and
regularly,
interesting, intentionally, and in some cases as if they were reading off of a script.
Yeah,
and probably, you know, I don't know that I have a unbiased opinion, but more women than men. Yeah, particularly younger women who are in Congress right now, and they're using it to they're using it to give vent to their frustration, obviously, with Trump and his agenda.
Well, there's a transparency thing there, I think, right? Like, it seems like a lot of times. Sorry if this is not the point that you're trying to go for, but like in my mind, if I imagine like an AOC type politician,
and she's definitely been one of those.
So young. Comes from like kind of has this origin story. This like was a bartender, just kind of like Queens, the real person who kind of then went and did the Mr. Smith Goes to Washington thing, and now is trying to do that thing. Like in my mind, if she is doing things like being more on TikTok than Facebook, like if a lot of the things that she does are intended to reach her demographic, which is probably going to skew
young left,
college type, probably not a lot of religious people.
Yeah.
So sure, like you could be like, okay, it's going to be safer for this person to drop an F-bomb than on average. But like, I wonder, like in my head, I'm like, there's like a transparency thing maybe where it just feels like something like the opposite of like the overly polite, like we're going to do our very formality. And I wonder if that, like, it might be the wrong choice, but I wonder, is that
I think some of the pundits literally don't see it as, from what I've read, both on the left and the right, like Carville and some of those others. Yeah. They see it as a bit of a craven approach to, again, appealing to those. Okay. But also a passion thing and a way to just kind of separate, which is quite interesting because I don't know if I ever remember a president who swore as much in public as Trump does. I mean, literally within the last hour,
Does he swear a lot in public? Like, I don't listen to a lot of his speeches for mental health reasons. So does he do that?
Yeah, he does.
I mean, I imagine he does behind the scenes, but I don't know what he's like.
He did in his campaign, and I was listening to the remarks for the National Day of Prayer. Yeah, and he didn't filter himself at all, and there he is in a garden full of religious representatives from everything from A to Z. Right. Because let's all admit it, love him or hate him, he didn't care. Right. If I were a man who swore, I would, make that even more colorful. Right. But the reality is, I think we can all agree, our language has coarsened over the last several years, whether we're talking TV or politics or anything else. And I mean, I regularly have heard pastors swear and sometimes swear in the pulpit. It's one of the things that got the guy out in Washington in trouble. I can't remember his name. So, but the one that they did, the Mars Hill guy.
Mark Driscoll?
Mark Driscoll, yeah. He would regularly swear in public while preaching and so forth. Yeah. So that's just one aspect of it. Yeah. That's just, I don't know why I ended up on that. But if you've listened this long, I wanted you to know that this is Life Talks. My name is Dan Burrell. I'm one of the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship in Charlotte, and I'm joined with Josh Brahm, a guy who we can literally talk about the dumbest things, the most personal things, the most philosophical things. So we just kind of like talk all the time, and then sometimes we invite you to listen. Yeah, so that's true. So I appreciate the fact that you're joining us today, and we're going to do just a a little mini series, if I could, on something I'm just saying, whatever happened to manners? Whatever happened to manners? So, Josh, funny story.
Yes.
Several years ago, I wrote some article or something or other, and I took a portion of it and put it on my social media.
Okay.
And it was like, how to teach your young man to be a gentleman.
How to teach your young man to be a gentleman? Okay, got it.
Yeah. And it was some things that we actually talk about here, but there was an extensive, that we'll be talking about today, there was an extensive section on how to treat a lady.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's important. I literally was taught, how do you take a chair and help them be seated at a table? What side of the sidewalk to walk on when you're out on a public street? All these things that were literally taught to me formally, and which I taught to my sons.
Yeah.
And I mean to tell you, I don't know when I have gotten more splashback on, because they apparently got passed around enough that it wasn't just to my little corner, my little niche of the world.
Oh, did this go like viral?
It didn't go viral.
Canceled before canceling was a thing a little bit?
It was. If they could have canceled me, they would. I was called a chauvinist, a misogynist, outdated,
what were the most
archaic
extreme things that people were reacting to? Because I imagine people are going to be fine with some of it. Yeah. So like, was there a certain thing that people were reacting to in particular?
Yeah, anything that in regard to deference to a woman's femininity, or perhaps that she wasn't an equal physically to a man. Okay. So, for instance, and these are some of the things I plan on going through in my list of manners that we ought to recapture. Yeah. But I was always taught, when a woman is going up the stairs, you go behind her. When we're going down the stairs, you go in front of her. So if she falls, you break the fall. Okay, that was a courtesy. That when you walk down a sidewalk, the man always walks nearest the curb in case a car jumps the curb. He hits you, not her. Yeah, those are pretty basic. How do you help a woman up the stairs? You hold her wrist and elbow. Those.
So this is so interesting, because like all of those things were just like, I mean, common sense is such a cliche, but like everyone kind of like I don't feel like anyone really batted an eye about that probably like 200 years ago.
That's what I thought.
And what's interesting is that like presumably there's been sort of this like education gap where like a lot of parents are not teaching their kids the kinds of things that we're going to talk about in the next several episodes. And as a result, like at some point, I don't know how long that gap is, but maybe you passed it where suddenly people are like, what is this standing in front of women on stairs just in case they fall? Like at some point it becomes weird. Whereas I wonder if everything can just roll and like just like everyone just keeps on like teaching this, if it wouldn't be as weird. That's so interesting.
Well, and here's the other thing that kind of gets me is a lot of and I'm lumping them out. I don't know these people from Job's Turkey. Sure, but
who. What was that reference?
You've never... Oh, okay.
What was that?
That's a Danism that comes from my country background.
Joe Starkey?
Job's Turkey.
Turkey?
Yeah, we use that for someone who's dumb, someone who is...
it's like dumber than a box of rocks kind of a thing.
Or unknown, because nobody
Job's Turkey? Like Job, the Bible, Job?
Yeah, I don't know where it comes from. It just slips out. Sorry.
Did they have turkeys?
No idea.
And wouldn't they be dead?
Anyway, there's a lot of things about it.
Sorry, I just had to know. Like, if you're going to say things like that around me, I need to know what the heck that means.
I have people on our staff who keep a list of these, actually. And
we should bring them on sometime and go through this list.
Not, but
okay. Anyway, sorry.
But the
I can't help myself.
The idea is that there's a lot of toxic masculinity out there.
Yes,
I think we would agree that
and
Jake
coming
Paul
back.
And who's
Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate
brothers.
Is a big
and I mean these guys are, in my opinion, almost criminally misogynistic.
Oh yeah, Andrew Tate belongs in jail in multiple countries, and the fact that Trump got him into the country is
tragic.
Shameful.
Yeah.
Terrible person, and the fact that someone like Andrew Tate or other jerks like this can get a platform and get enough guys following it, they're like, just like that's their reaction to this is like surprising to me.
So when people say to me, there is no such thing as toxic masculinity, I say, no. Yeah. There is such a thing.
Yes.
But you see, what happens is our pendulum also, socially, anthropologically, always swings to these extremes. Yes. It does it politically. It does it morally. There's you can look over the arc of history and see these. And I think we're in the midst of that. I mean, I think one of the reasons Kamala Harris, and this wasn't supposed to be a political, but I mean, just it's real life, right?
Yeah.
Lost was because there was a sudden shift in young men away. Well, quite frankly, I don't think they voted in the past, but I think they did in this election. I think it was the difference in a couple of states that they did so. So, this pendulum is swinging. And, there's this golden mean that I think is super important as you analyze history, but also as you talk about these kinds of things. Even in a religions go from fundamentalist to progressive, Yeah. And so when we react to the extremes, we pass common sense. And in my opinion, we pass biblicity because the Bible has a theme of moderation that's built on absolute truth. But the absolute truth is not an excuse for license, nor should be the impetus for legalism.
Yeah.
Those are two extremes.
Yes.
And then a lot of times I see people who get freed from legalism run over to license. In the middle is liberty. That's true for us politically. We were leaving the tyranny of King George, and we created this exquisite model of the American democracy that was led by morally upright people, but also allowed them personal autonomy, liberty, freedom of choice in a lot of areas. But we have now taken that liberty. We want more and more and more of it. We're going to move to the point of license. Well, license, when it collapses, requires another response. And then you go to totalitarianism.
Yeah. So, tracking with that. And so before we get into the list, I'm going to do that annoying thing where it's like, I want add up another potential layer and see what you think of it. Like, I wonder if part of what people were reacting to there is like this thing. So we talked about like there's this education gap where like at some point it just kind of becomes weird. People reacting to toxic masculinity, but like similar. Like I wonder if in some people's minds when they're like, okay, here are these in their minds old fashioned, like literally, like from old times rules that on their own, a lot of them are going to seem at least very morally neutral, if not like positive things. But I wonder if are they connecting to like, yes, but these were written by the same guys that also like weren't wanting their wives to vote. In fact, some of the emails, rape was legal.
Yeah, some of the responses that I got that were a little more detailed, retorts maybe would be better, was that, you want to go back to the notion that women are inferior, that they should best be in the kitchen,
right?
Make me a sandwich, that meme.
Breastfeeding twins while cleaning the dishes. Yeah.
So, and I reject that. I do reject that. Unfortunately, whenever people are screaming at you on the internet, there's no way to really engage them in thoughtful interaction. Sure. But I'm still going to advocate as a dinosaur, as a boomer or whatever, that there is a need in civilization for appropriate, agreed upon manners. I believe this has a biblical basis because the scripture tells us, we're supposed to love our neighbor in Mark chapter 12. We're to honor others, Romans chapter 12. We're to speak with grace, Colossians chapter 4. We ought to be practicing practicing a way of life that does not distract others from our testimony, but rather attracts people by our testimony to the truth, to the Word of God, to the gospel. When we foster a culture of kindness and respect and grace and humility, all of those things allow the culture to flourish. So it's my argument, Josh, and I have one of my degrees is in history education, but if you look at the arc of history, you also see a correlation between the spread of the gospel and the rise of cultured behavior, civilization, arts, those kind of things. So it started in the Middle East, and again, you had mathematicians and scientists and so forth, and then it eventually migrated. The Apostle Paul introduced it, and the apostles introduced it, to Greece and Rome and the minor Asian states and so forth. And so it spread across Europe, and even through the influence of the Catholic Church, some of the greatest cathedrals, some of the greatest music, some of the greatest art that's ever existed in man's existence was created during this Renaissance of time. Then you had the Great Migration across to the United States. And the United States has often been known, while not as closely adhered to as perhaps Great Britain, because to me, Great Britain epitomized it's more than adoption, but the canonization of certain behavior among the higher classes, the Downton Abbey type stuff, you know. But a lot of that did immigrate to the United States. We've always, Canada, for instance, in North America, Canada, those people are so nice.
Yes.
It is uncanny Well, but it is pro-Canadian.
I mean, I would bet like all the money I have in my pocket that I probably actually read one of the same books as you growing up in school, like that relates to this. So I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it's like, did you guys have to read, like, it's like George Washington's 110, I think it is, like, manners. Do you not know what I'm talking about? No, you're looking at me blankly.
No,
I can't believe it.
I'm very familiar with one that Benjamin Franklin wrote on his sins, but I'm not on this one. No,
so George Washington, I'm almost positive.
I'm going to Google this so fast.
I'm almost positive. So I think George Washington, like, and I don't think they're originals. Just like he had been taught all these manners. I think that he ended up like copying 110 of his favorites or something, and then that sort of got republished as its own book as like George Washington's like
fascinated
rules of manners or something. I cannot believe that you did not read this. That I read this book and you didn't. But it had this stuff. It was like all this kinds of things that you're talking about. Like, of course, we should be charitable and open the door and hold the seat. So like all those like the basic things that you're wanting to get back to is like early America seemed like kind of a
and they were sometimes referred to as the common virtues.
Yes.
Yeah, and so you would want to have these character virtues.
Yes.
So seriously, when was the last time any of us ever heard of anything in our educational system that dealt with a list of common? We have a new set of virtues today that are often taught by progressives that involves tolerance. It celebrates things that the Scripture would teach us are outside of biblical behavior, and yet we're expected to show tolerance and grace and so forth. So there is virtue. There are virtues that are taught.
Yeah.
But certainly not the same list that Mr. Washington might have done.
It's not the 110 list. It's just different.
Which
it's different
I definitely
things.
need to look up.
And there's going to be some things that I imagine that they're teaching in schools now where you would agree, or there'd be like a lot of overlap where it's like, like it might be like dumbed down, but like I bet there's some Venn diagram overlap between the George Washington things and the things that they're teaching kids. Like don't touch other people,
but respect other people's,
like
respect people's personal space. Don't be coarse. Those kind of things. We still teach them at some level. Usually in elementary school. By the time we get to high school, we're done.
Yeah.
The culture is educating our kids as to their virtues. Whether it's social media or the movies or video games or so forth. You can. I work a lot with Zoomers, and you can take a perfectly placid, mild-mannered.
Define Zoomers.
Zoomers are people, I think right now, the top age of that is like, right now they're about 26 or so, and I think maybe a little older than that, and it goes down. It was actually people that were born up to the year 2000, I think. But now the next generation that's emerging, coming up through elementary and high school, are called the Alpha generation, dealing with, it's reset.
So this is Gen
from
Z?
Yeah, Gen Z now, it's resetting at the Alpha generation. It's not Alpha as in masculine.
Right.
But the fact is, our cultural, again, and I made that little joke, my grandma would have the vapors. Of course, nobody knows what vapors are, but it was, fainting.
I know. It's like, your grandma was vaping? It's like what all these kids are going to be thinking. They're not going to know what that means anymore.
Right. Yeah, I like to use some terms that the kids use. Like
my grandma was buying, ice cream at the soda fountain, like that whole like John Mulaney joke. It's like no one knows what this means
makes
anymore.
Me sad. Side note, this story is so funny. I was at church the other day, and I do look for terms I can use just so that I can get the wide-eyed look of shock. And there's a young guy, I hadn't seen him in a while, but there's a certain stage when boys just sprout up all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And so this guy, he's a great kid, and he's standing there with his dad, and I said, "Dude, man, you've really glowed up." Have you ever heard that term?
Yes,
yeah, I know. And he looked at me like, "What did you say?"
To be fair, I feel like I only heard this recently.
It's an expression that's often on the internet that talks about when you're young before puberty hits, and then of course often it's used to describe you as a gorgeous woman or this really fine looking guy, and they say, "Oh, they glowed up," and then they actually post the pictures of pre-puberty, post-puberty.
It's like all the cheesy movies where where the Princess Diaries, where the girl just needs to get her glasses off, and,
gets
have a little bit of makeup,
and then gets her hair done.
Boom! Yeah, she's gorgeous,
glowed up.
Okay.
But I don't know why I'm telling you this. But anyway,
you knew this term.
The Gen Zs today have very little formal education on what there should be, and I think this is good parenting. You know,
yes.
And some of these I'm going to talk about. I'm going to tell you how I taught my sons. My dad taught me, and I think this is a part of responsible parenting. That good manners never offends. Bad manners definitely will. It's like grammar. I always told my kids, use good grammar. Good grammar never causes someone to look at you like you're an idiot. Bad grammar, you can be the most educated person in the world, but you insult the Queen's English with bad grammar, and people are going to look at you like you don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, except the irony is, I think that we've learned from your blog post that sometimes good manners do offend, because if they are if they're too sensitive to potentially what you might be implying about femininity, then you might.
I go into full boomer mode and say, "Well, they're just idiots."
right. I have pushed him to that point.
So we won't get through hardly any today in this episode.
Let's get through some. I think this is good, because I feel like as a parent who wants to teach my kids good manners and has not gotten the George Washington book for them. Like, I just haven't done that. I think probably some of these things that I've barely skimmed this. We've probably taught some of these, but some of these we haven't, and it would just be a good reminder. Write down at least the ones that you haven't gone over with your kids. There's going to be a few of these that probably
we'll start with low-hanging fruit. First one is learning to say please and thank you.
Yes. Hopefully everyone has done this.
And you do that with your toddlers. It's one of the easiest ones to teach.
Yep.
They say, may I have a cookie? And you say, may I have a cookie what? And then, they'll say, may I have a cookie now? No, that's not the word we're looking for. Until they say, please. Every once in a while, you get a stubborn child, and I had one of those, who will just do, just stare you down to death. And it gets down to, how bad do I want that cookie before they finally get out the please.
Right.
And the same thing with thank you. Yep. And so you give them something, you say, what do you say? Right. And you almost sing-songy, and they say thank you. So that's an easy one. Yep. Another one is simply holding the door open for other people. Mm-hmm. This would include, ladies, I'll tell you another story. I did this one time at the Circle K gas station right down the street. And I always just kind of check, out my peripheral vision to see if somebody's coming up.
Right.
And by the way, I'm just taught this, so I don't care really who you are, unless you're like a teenage boy. I'm not gonna hold the door for a teenage boy. But if I still feel like I'm 30. And so if there's a guy with gray hair that comes up, I honestly hold the door for him.
So I'm even worse than you. I didn't even know that there were any groups of people that I shouldn't be holding the door open. I'm the guy that's holding the door open awkwardly for too long, because you're
it turns into 20 a full-time job.
But I'm just I saw you though. So I feel like I'm gonna stay here. I'd rather be too courteous.
In my head, I'm going through what is the distance from the store when it's acceptable?
Yes. You start doing the trigonometry in your head of I need to slow down or else it's going to get really awkward really fast.
That's hilarious. But I was going into that Circle K one time, and I held the door for a woman, and she looked at me dead in the eye. She took the door from my hand and said, I'm quite capable of opening the door myself.
Man.
Now, to me, that's a whole nother level of rudeness.
She was the problem, not you.
Yeah. And so...
So good manners can offend, but they shouldn't.
Yes.
When you have the right intent, and the 5% of people that will actually get offended.
And in my world, I would rather be guilty of offending a few for doing the right thing than offending more, or just not being a good testimony for doing the wrong thing.
Yes.
The third thing, and then we'll end with this one, we'll pick them up, how to shake hands.
Yeah.
That's a big one. My dad taught me this. My dad taught me then he said, you go in and you hit the webbing. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see it. You hit the webbing.
I never got this talk. I'm fascinated.
Yeah,
so keep going.
You go like this, hit the webbing, and turn your hand and grasp firmly. And you want to grasp like this. Something that a friend of mine taught me, because his dad had taught him too, is that every once in a while you'll do that and your hand won't be right, and they catch you like this, and it feels so awkward. Yeah. Yes. So to this day I do this. Hang on, let me give that one another shot. I want to really shake your hand.
I like that.
Because I don't want to, and there is a little bit of alpha beta thing going on there.
Sure.
I hate people that just squeeze your hand until you trickling down your leg, because it hurts. And I've had people do it, if your ring gets twisted.
Yeah, I've had that.
Yeah, there's no
pinches.
But it ought to be firm.
Like that, or there's people that want to the other hand goes on. Every picture of Trump with politicians, he's attempting to do this thing.
He does the down.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's things not to do, but for sure, a good solid grip, couple of shakes.
Now, again, so that I'm always thought the misogynist or sexist or whatever. Right. We were taught formally in my high school by an etiquette person. Yeah. Remember the days of Miss Manners and
I'm thinking like, did you see the League of Their Own, the movie League of Their Own? It's a really classic Tom Hanks movie based on the first one, like women's baseball teams during when World War II was happening. And it takes place, but like they sign all these amazing female athletes to play baseball, but like they make them go through like etiquette, like they're like walking around with books on their head, and like it is kind of funny because some of them are like it's like not naturally inclined, right, kind of thing. Like, but
in my high school, and again I know it's been 50 years, but my high school they literally did teach women how to sit, how to cross their legs when they sat, how to walk femininely, yeah, and they actually brought somebody from Mississippi who was like a Southern belle that taught some of this to the girls. And then at the end, the guys and the girls had a formal dinner, and it was like a cotillion type thing where we practiced our manners in a form. What I could, and the cool thing is this. I'm serious. Yeah, I'm just blathering today.
This is good. This is good.
I could go to the White House and know exactly how to act. Now I'll never go to the White House for a dinner. No. I could eat with the Queen of England. And I know what glass to use, what knife to use, what spoon to use, and and I'm grateful for that level of education. Yeah. I mostly eat with my fingers, but if required, I could eat at a fully set place. Right. And it makes me feel confident. It makes me feel perhaps a little less barbaric in a world that's gone that way. Yeah. But in the shaking of hands, it's a way to introduce yourself, and it's a way to show respect. Yeah. And I was getting ready to say a while ago, we were taught that a guy doesn't extend his hand to shake a woman's hand until she has extended it first. And even to this day, I generally don't, unless I'm just not thinking at the moment. I don't extend my hand first to a woman. I wait for her.
So, okay, that's really interesting. So I do something maybe a little bit similar, and I know we're over time at this point, but it's not going to make sense anywhere else. But so I saw a video a while back, and I think I read a few blog posts around the same time, but really it helped me understand for the first time. How there are a bunch of good guys who during the Me Too movement, just sort of like they hadn't done anything bad, but like they got a little bit more education on some of the subtler ways
don't be a bore.
Power dynamics can play out and things like that. So I read these articles that were basically from, Christian women sharing what it's like to have to go to church. And basically, because of social norms, especially in certain parts of the country where they are basically socially obligated, if not sort of forced, to hug all of these men that want to come and hug them, and sometimes hug them for too long, and sometimes their hands are a little bit moving. It's just like, it's very, and it just kind of just like makes them uncomfortable because they're not really getting a chance to choose anything. And so I have pretty much, I don't know if I have any exceptions. There's a lot. I'm a very huggy person. I love to make people feel warm and welcome. I will not initiate a hug, or probably I might initiate handshakes, but I definitely don't initiate hugs with any people of the opposite sex because I want them to never feel like, I wouldn't have chosen this, but now I kind of got to because now it's weirder to
some of that also is dependent upon the part of the country in which you live.
Yeah.
So we're in the South in North Carolina, but this is not particularly a Southern culture region.
South-ish.
Yeah. So many people are from New York and so forth. Yeah. So, but I lived in South Florida with a lot of Latinas, and if you didn't hug somebody and then do the cheek swap thing, you were rude. You were rude.
So there's a cultural dynamic going on there.
So I, living down there for nearly 20 years, went to Boston to teach for a week, and I met the president's wife, and she was a native New Englander, and I immediately went in for the cheek thing. My goodness, you would have thought I was so humiliated just by her surprised wooden shocked response. And I stopped. I paused. I said, I am so sorry. In Miami, if I don't do this.
Right.
And I forgot where I was for a moment. I didn't want to offend her, and I didn't want her to think I was being creepy.
Right.
But so there is, like, if you travel in parts of Europe or parts of the Middle East, in parts of the Middle East, men hold hands, but they don't hold hands with women in public. Right. So there are these cultural mores. So we're going to talk about this more. What I really want to do is, I don't want to appear to be legalistic, but I do want to be informative. Yes. And so as we go through this list over the next episode or two, if you're listening to this and you're a parent or a grandparent, I think you're going to hear some opportunities. Part of being the follower of Christ that we're called to be is to be examples of the believer, to be ambassadors for Christ, and to be salt and light. And one of the most effective ways to fulfill those callings is to be a good example. That's what Timothy was told by Paul. He said, be an example. Even though you're young, be an example of the believer. And then he listed several things. So I happen to think manners are a natural outgrowth of the grace and humility and character of nature of God that we find out in the Word. So we're going to talk about this more next time on Life Talks. Thanks as always for listening to us. Please share us on social media. Man, I got letters last week from several different places, some emails. Got one from Las Vegas. And I just want to say, wherever you are that you're listening, I have friends around the world that listen to me who I've met on mission trips. Thank you. Please share us if you would. And hopefully we're stimulating you to think. But as always, thanks for listening to us here at Life Talks.